So whatever the theme or the topic was, just for example, we're going through the Sermon on the Mount right now in our church. And just last week, I taught on sexuality, lust, divorce. It's a fun one, right? So I start with my expositional resources, make sure I'm understanding the words of Jesus. Then I go to the broader theology of sexuality. But then I start reading articles about sexuality. Like, what are people debating about sexuality right now? What are different churches, debating? How is the culture speaking about sexuality? I might listen to a podcast on it. I read a book this year written, some of you might have heard of this. It's my number one recommended book this year that's not a Christian book. It's written by a British woman who is not religious in any way, shape, or form, but the name of her book is The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. It was amazing. And so I ended up quoting her, and because she's basically saying like, hey, the sexual revolution is not the solution for humanity. It's kind of been a disaster. And for someone who's not a Christian saying that, oh, it's so helpful. But I want to read that at the end. I want to make sure I understand the text, and then I'm going to read my doctrinal resources, and then I'll dip into the more cultural resources like a podcast, like a sermon, or I might even add conversations with your neighbors and your friends. As I'm studying and preparing my sermons, I talk with my neighbors and, I'll just bring up, hey, what's your view on like sexuality? I will literally just ask them. They all know I'm a pastor and like, oh, what are you teaching on? Or when I was in England, what are you teaching on, Vicar? I'm like, well, I'm teaching on this. And I'm like, what do you think about that? Because I want to know what my friends who are not Christians and neighbors, how are they, talking about this? In many ways, those conversations end up shaping my introductions. The conversations I have with my neighbors, some of the cultural books that I'm reading, those end up shaping my introductions because I want to show people who are in the audience, some of whom are not Christians, I basically want to show them why what we're talking about now matters and why they need to listen for the next 35 minutes.